So you want to live in the Seattle Metro? Well, good luck. For years, you've been hearing the same story. Tech jobs are booming. Everyone wants to move here. Prices are through the roof. But it's simply supply and demand, right? Well, it's a lot different than what you think. And what if I told you the real story was unbelievably more frustrating and unbelievably more complicated? This isn't about population growth. This isn't about just jobs. This is a story about a decades long crisis and a massive structural problem here in the state of Washington that started before the great financial crisis. And when the great financial crisis showed up, and it became exponentially worse based on politics, policy, overregulation, and the compounding costs of building homes. The truth is, the Seattle Metro is not in a crisis. This isn't a problem that is here to be solved. It's an inevitable outcome of a system that was built to fail. And now you and I are paying for it. And guess what? The next generations are going to pay for it. We're going to peel back the layers of this onion. Everything from how absurd it is to try to build a home here in our local area, to all of the local builders that vanished, and how policy is preventing you from getting an affordable home. If you've ever looked at a for sale sign and thought, man, I'd like to live in this area, but I can't afford this property, I need you to buckle up, because this is the story of how the government became your worst enemy. So stick around to the last section because we want to give you a glimpse of an actual solution that no one's talking about and why this is one of the only ways out. I'm Anton Stetner. I live here in the north end of the Seattle Metro. I've been doing land development, new construction, and selling real estate since the early 2000s. We've sold thousands of homes here locally, and we build, we flip, we develop, and then, of course, we hold properties. So I've been experiencing what I'm going to share with you as a story firsthand the whole time over the last 20 plus years. And if you could do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, or drop any questions you have below, I would greatly appreciate it. We'll do our best to answer all of your comments as they come in, but that helps significantly here with the YouTube algorithm. Now let's get into this. The Great Financial Crisis, number one. Let's set some historical context for what we're seeing here and explain how the GFC wasn't just a temporary setback for the Seattle Metro, but it created a massive structural wound inside of our housing market. And it essentially just carved out the whole ecosystem that was building homes in our area. And it took out the small local builders and the banks that finance them. You need to understand there was a before and after landscape. See, in the early 2000s, when I worked for builders, developers, and investors, I did a lot of land acquisition for them. I was the deal guy. I'd go out there and hunt it down. As I was hunting it down, we could pay 100% loan to value because someone would finance you the full development cost, the construction cost, and as long as you could keep the values in line. During the great financial crisis, all of these local banks in Washington state went under. And as they went under, what happened is the requirements for capital shot through the roof. Today, you're sitting at 75% loan to cost. That means the average builder, the average developer today has to have 25 to 35% and sometimes as high as 40% more cash into a project than they did pre-great financial crisis. That means that yes, they are more solvent, but it requires more money. And if it requires more capital, less people are willing to take the risk. And if less people are willing to take the risk, what it does is it removes our local builders in that competition. And it makes only the national builders that have hedge fund money, Wall Street money, able to come in and build. But what are they building? Are they building starter homes for first-time home buyers for the next generation? Do you see ramblers being built out there? No. We're not building small homes because they can't make enough profit. So we're only building large homes. They're all over 2,400 square feet because that's where they can make all the money. And to make matters worse, our state regulators are using zoning to force something down your throat that I know you don't like. But guess what? We are all choking on it right now. And I'm talking about those giant stacks of multifamily. They've been unwilling to expand the urban growth boundaries. And instead, what they're doing is they're shoving in massive density. And I'm going to go through the number of housing permits right now so we can all be on the same level. In 1990, Washington State issued 41,500 building permits for the state. Single family permits was about 25,600 and multifamily was 15,900. And in King County, we put out about 13,000 permits. Fast forward to 2000, you had 35,500 permits total. 20,400 of those were single family and 15,100 were multifamily, with about 14,000 in King. So notice how it's all getting clustered right around Seattle. Then we get to 2005, the start of the tip, the start of the problem. In 2005, we peaked in Washington State at 43,200 permits. We then issued 23,000 single families that year and 20,200 multifamily, and 16,500 of those were in King County. Dun, 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 dun. Great financial crisis happens. It's 2008. Oh no, we issue 18,900 permits, 9,000 single families, 11,100 multifamilies, and 7,500 in King County. By 2015, we are finally back. So there is a dip. There is genuinely a gorge, a ravine, the Grand Canyon of missing permits during the great financial crisis. I don't know how else I can describe this to you. By 2015, we are back to 36,000, not back to the peak. And we have 11,000 single family permits, 25,000 multifamily. Uh-oh, there's our problem. 16,000 of this total are happening in King County. By 2020, we hit 35,500 permits total. Still not back to the peak. 17,000 single family permits, 18,300 multifamily. Multifamily are still outpacing single family, with 12,300 of those happening in King County. Now, that's total permits every time I mention King County. 2023, you get to 37,000, but we only put together 10,000 single families, with 27,000, over 27,000 multi. In King County, we end up with 10,600. In 2024, the projected number, and we don't have them for 2025, is that we did about 47,500 for Washington State. But once again, only 10,000 of those were a single family. 37,500 were multifamily and about 10,500 were issued total in King County. So we're building these large stacks of multifamilies. We're not building single families, and it started all around the great financial crisis. But there was even more problems brewing in the background. So we got single family home construction going down. And that's what everyone wants. But we're also started baking in during that same time period a massive compounding of taxes, fees, regulatory burden that started pushing prices here in the Seattle Metro just straight into the stratosphere. And we're going to break that down for you next. Part 2, compounding cost burdens. If you know a contractor or someone who builds homes, I want you to go ask them a question. I want you to ask them what they're paying in B&O taxes and how much they're paying per hour in L&I. And you're going to find some absolutely staggering numbers. And what you're going to see is that a lot of the labor here in Washington State is being paid. 30% of that labor is simply taxes and L&I to the small business, which of course then gets passed directly on to you, the consumer. Second, you saw the energy code here in the state of Washington massively increase. And what I mean by that, now, I'm conflicted with these things. I love some of this stuff because I love high performance homes. And at the same time, the more of these things we force into new construction, the more costly it becomes. And what I'm talking about when I say energy codes is I'm talking about the type of insulation. I'm talking about exterior insulation. I'm talking about the U value of the windows, the thermal efficiency of the windows. I'm talking about the efficiency of the furnace. I'm talking about more air gaps being sealed inside of the property to make them thermally efficient. The nerd in me loves this stuff. But the brain in me, the logical portion goes, "Oh my goodness. These are massively impacting the price of the home." So I want to go into section 3, and then I'm going to deliver to you how much this is impacting the price of a home. Section 3 is this idea of regulatory chokehold. How is the state government, the county, and the city preventing you from getting into a home at an affordable price? In the early 1990s, the Growth Management Act was introduced to control suburban sprawl. In the early 1990s, the growth management was introduced as legislation at the state level, and it was designed to control suburban sprawl. We wanted to preserve the farmlands. We wanted to preserve where industrial property was going to be. We wanted to make sure that we were getting density on the I-5 corridor. But what was the massive unintended consequences of the Growth Management Act? The Growth Management Act took the supply of developable land and it combined it into what is called the UGA, which is the urban growth areas. And these are artificial lines that were drawn in the 1990s. And it caused those land prices to massively shoot through the roof because whenever the government artificially restricts supply with the same or greater demand, prices have to go up. And with that increase in the price of land also came the zoning, the building code, the red tape. In the early 2000s, when I started in new construction and land development, you could get a building permit quite easily within 3 to 4 months. I received a phone call this week from someone who's looking to do something in King County. And they said, could I build a home in King County this year? And I unfortunately had to just giggle. I told them it was going to take them over a year just to get their building permit. Plus, then you have to actually build the property. I said, you need to budget in 2 years in order to get this timeline done. And they were just flabbergasted. I said, you also need to budget $35,000 to $50,000 that you're going to burn up front to see if it's even going to work. Plus the cost of the land, plus the cost to build the home, plus the carrying costs, plus the stress and the gray hair of jumping through the process. So you can see that, and when we dig into those fees, when you go to apply for a permit, your permit for one unit is going to cost you anywhere between $20,000 to $50,000 when you bring in the water, the sewer, the parks, the schools, all the hookup fees, the traffic fees. Each municipality is going to be a little bit different, but it's never cheaper than 20 grand. So you've got the builders screaming, we have no more land. You've got the municipalities tightening down on us with development timelines, building timelines, and red tape. If you've talked to builders, you've heard them say there's no more buildable land. And that's actually true. We're running out of buildable land. But how much land have we used here in the state of Washington? We've actually only built on less than 4% of the total land in the whole state. So we're artificially pinching this through zoning, forcing up the pricing. So builders are screaming no more land. Home buyers and builders are screaming about regulatory burden, about zoning, about timelines. And then potential home buyers are screaming, this is all unaffordable. There's a massive cost burden. And that massive cost burden can be broken down into a few things. One, the upfront cost to do it. Like I said, that generally costs us an average of 25 grand to see if a property is going to even work. Two, the actual construction and regulatory, no. Two, the red tape. Two, the red tape to go through the building process. That adds, on average, probably about 50 grand because of the timelines, because of the back and forth, because of the hiring of additional consultants. Three, the energy codes add about 29,000 to the price of every new home. And that shows up in the type of windows, in the type of insulation, in the efficiency of the furnace, etc. All in all, studies here in the state of Washington have said about 30% of the cost of a home, 30% is in relation to this regulatory burden, these timelines, these energy codes. So if you're in King County and the average home is 1.1, we're talking 350 grand is in relation to this red tape. If you're in Snohomish County and the average home is $800,000, I'm talking 240 grand. If you took 240 grand off the price of a home, would it be massively more affordable to the general public? Yes or yes? Okay, so now you're thinking this is all bad. What's the solution? How do we figure out a way out of this massive mess, this interlocking web? And what's our way forward? And can we do it by just pulling one thread? And in the final part of this video, I want to connect the dots for you about how we can possibly fix this and create opportunity for you and future generations. Part 4, the interlocking mess and a path forward. So understand that the Growth Management Act started this issue. And then the great financial crisis became a giant wound in our housing supply. Plus, you had all these compounding effects that have essentially become headwinds. The limited supply of land, the rising cost of labor, the rising cost of materials, the regulatory burden, and the massive timelines associated with getting new construction and land development completed. These aren't isolated issues, and it's not one city or one county. It's the whole metro. Some are better than others. But what we have created is we've created a self-reinforcing cycle that's sitting there constricting the supply and forcing up home prices. Ask yourself this question. Why did home prices rise in 2024 and in 2025 in the face of historically high interest rates? It is the lack of supply. And people say, no, it's hedge funds. No, it's landlords. No, it's investors. No, it's foreigners not occupying the property. All of that is BS that the media is selling you. It is a lack of supply, but that is an unsexy answer. So what is our way forward? Our way forward starts in local governments, getting people elected to city council, county council, planning commissions, utility districts who are pro housing. At the state level, they came through and they tried to force the local cities and counties through middle housing and the ADU bill to build more units. But what are these cities and counties doing right now? They're pushing back against that legislation. They are trying to prevent that from happening because we have a bunch of NIMBYs saying, not in my backyard. When we are in a housing crisis here in Washington state, we need to look at things like the Puget Sound Regional Council. The PSRC is a government body that you've probably never heard of. It's a bunch of unelected bureaucrats who get together, who control all of the zoning and the suburban sprawl. And they just voted not to expand the buildable lands area here inside of the Puget Sound. So you're not getting more property to be able to build on, which means more density. So ask yourself, do I want more multifamily or do I want more single family? So we got to start at the local level, then we got to go to the PSRC, then we got to talk about GMA reform. That's Growth Management Act reform. The urban growth boundaries have not been significantly expanded since the 1990s. Does that make sense to you? Did more people maybe move here during that timeline? We've got to talk about standardizing the permitting process. Each city, each county should not have a different permitting and land development process. We need unified development code. We need to make it so the individual who works as a civil servant can't randomly decide whether your building permit or your development application gets approved based on their wants and needs. We've got to standardize the process and make it faster, quicker, and more affordable, or you will never get any affordable single family homes built, which includes reevaluating all of the regulatory costs, all of the regulatory burden. And guess what? Some of these people need to go back to work. I'm sick of getting voicemails and emails saying I'm out of the office or I'm working from home. Back in the day, you could walk in and you could talk to them. You could have a conversation. You could quickly solve the problem, human to human, and figure it out. So either we've got to automate that job away, or we've got to make people more accessible with a more unified development code. This isn't a simple problem with a simple solution. This is a problem where we have to attack it from 10 different ways because it is essentially a political and a structural failure of Washington state and of our counties and of our cities to be able to provide affordable housing. Not even affordable housing, attainable housing. Affordable housing could also mean rentals, and I don't want to see more stacks of multifamily. But by understanding the root of this crisis and where we came from, you can hopefully start demanding a better future. And the question is are you willing to do what it takes? Are you willing to go speak out? Are you willing to call your local politicians, your local people at the city, state, and county level and start talking to them about how we need more housing? Because I don't want the dream of home ownership to be out of touch for Washingtonians, for first-time homebuyers, for people moving into the area, for my young kids when they go to purchase their home and when your kids go to purchase theirs. Because this isn't just a housing problem. This is becoming a social and an economic crisis. Please hear me out. If you want to dive deeper into reports like this or numbers like this, or you have questions, drop them in the comments below. I will reply to as many of them as possible. I will go find you the data. I will send you a link. I am very passionate about this. I spend my own personal money fighting these things and being a part of local politics so I can do everything I can. And I want you to get involved too, because understanding the crisis, where this started and where we're going, is what it's going to take to move us forward towards a better future. So hit that like button if you like talking about housing, real estate, economics, real estate investing. I'm Anton Stetner here in the Seattle Metro. We're here to help. We can find you other people outside of Washington state if you're not from our state, or if you need to move in. You can reach us at rsg.com and subscribe for that next deep dive. Let us know what you guys want to hear.